Imagine a sensor like the size of a single virus, and it is just floating through your bloodstream right now.
Yeah, just constantly scanning your biological state.
Exactly, scanning everything and transmitting that data in real time to a local cell tower. Now imagine the person who actually designed that sensor telling the world that this tech is ultimately about, quote, controlling your genome.
Which sounds completely like science fiction, right?
It really does.
Yeah.
And we are looking at a narrative that insists this isn't science fiction at all, but a highly coordinated reality that's currently unfolding all around us.
Yeah, the document we're examining today takes all those isolated technological concepts and kind of binds them into this massive, unified theory of everything.
Right. And before we get into the mechanics of this, we need to set a hard boundary for you, the listener. This source material is built on deeply controversial claims and politically charged viewpoints, specifically regarding things like global health, the COVID-19 pandemic, mass censorship, and government surveillance.
Yeah, and it's important to state that neither of us here is endorsing these viewpoints. We're not taking a side either.
Exactly. We are acting strictly as impartial guides. Okay, let's unpack this. Because the architecture of this belief system is what makes it so incredibly resilient.
Oh, absolutely. The compiler of this page doesn't just, rant into the void. They've aggregated official U.S. government mandates, peer-reviewed scientific papers, academic lectures. They use all of it to build this sprawling framework.
Yeah, they're using mainstream scientific literature as the mortar for a deeply anti-institutional worldview, which is wild.
So what is it?
So NNI stands for the National Nanotechnology Initiative. Officially, it's just a U.S. government research and development program.
Sounds pretty standard.
Right, but the compiler of this page points out the sheer bureaucratic scale of it. The NNI isn't like a single lab somewhere. It's coordinated across 26 different federal agencies.
Wow, 26.
Yeah. And the source provides direct links to show how deeply embedded this is in the federal apparatus. Like, they point out the Department of Defense has been investing in nanoscience since the 1980s. The EPA tracks the environmental fallout of engineered nanomaterials. It's like a giant corporate conglomerate, really, where you have 26 vastly different departments, from space exploration at NASA to highway construction at the DOT, and they're all secretly obsessed with the exact same microscopic building blocks.
That's a great way to put it.
I noticed they even linked to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, the USPTO, and they pointed out that the Patent Office created an entirely new patent classification, Class 977, just for nanotechnology.
Yeah, that detail is really crucial to their argument.
It stuck out to me because, well, you don't create a new patent class unless the fundamental mechanics of an invention have changed. Like, if you patent a new chair, it's just about the shape. But when you get down to the nanoscale, materials stop behaving according to classical physics. Quantum mechanics take over.
Right, things get weird at that scale.
Really weird. A material that is an insulator at a normal size might suddenly become a conductor at the nanoscale. So the source is using that bureaucratic detail to say, look, even the Patent Office recognizes this is a completely different frontier of human engineering.
What's fascinating here is how the source leverages that bureaucratic omnipresence. Like, they list the Department of Transportation looking into quantum dots for highway displays.
Quantum dots.
Yeah, they're essentially nanoscale semiconductors that emit these specific, highly durable frequencies of light. So the narrative being constructed is that nanotechnology is already everywhere. It's in the asphalt, the military, the environment, the patent system.
It establishes a baseline of total environmental saturation.
Precisely.
But environmental saturation is just the setup. The source drops the real anchor right at the top of this massive agency list. They provide a specific search link titled, quote, National Nanotechnology Initiative Role in COVID-19 Vaccine.
Yeah, and that is the absolute core focus of the page.
It really is. It takes a 25-year abstract multi-agency infrastructure and crashes it directly into the most significant global health event of our generation.
And that linkage is very deliberate. It's crucial to the compiler's argument. In this framework, the COVID-19 pandemic response wasn't just a reactive medical emergency.
Right, they see it differently.
Very differently. The source frames the rapid deployment of the mRNA vaccines, which rely on lipid nanoparticles to deliver genetic instructions to your cells. They frame that as the grand commercial application event for this whole 25-year NNI infrastructure.
They're essentially arguing that the pandemic provided the justification to inject the population with the very tech the NNI has been quietly developing across all those 26 agencies for decades.
Exactly. It recasts the entire global health apparatus.
I mean, if you view the NNI simply as a government funding pool, it's just boring administrative overhead, right?
Totally boring.
But if you view it through the lens of this Rumble page, with the COVID-19 vaccine sitting at the apex of it all, it suddenly looks like a coordinated, multi-decade dragnet.
Yeah, and the psychological mechanism at play here is basically pattern recognition applied to institutional trauma.
Oh, that's an interesting way to phrase it.
Well, think about it. The audience reading this page already harbors immense distrust regarding the pandemic and vaccine mandates. So when this compiler shows them that the nanotechnology inside the vaccine is part of this much larger web involving the Department of Defense and intelligence agencies, it retroactively validates all their initial skepticism.
But the COVID-19 vaccine is framed almost as past tense in this document, which I found surprising.
Yeah, it's the jumping off point.
Right, because the bulk of the scientific papers link on this page are actually looking forward to where this microscopic infrastructure is heading next. And the key phrase that just keeps appearing in the source is the Internet of Bio-Nano Things.
Yes. This is where the source transitions from talking about government bureaucracy into cutting-edge telecommunications research.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, they heavily cite the work of a researcher named Ian F. Achilles, specifically a paper he co-authored titled Panacea, which stands for an Internet of Bio-Nano Things application for early detection and mitigation of infectious diseases.
Okay, we're all familiar with the Internet of Things, right? The IoT. Like, that's my smartwatch talking to my phone, or my smart thermostat adjusting based on sensor data. But the Panacea paper is taking that exact same network logic and applying it to biology.
Yes, internal biology.
The source actually includes a direct quote stating, the goal is to connect external infrastructure to, quote, all observable entities in the universe, ranging from molecules and cells within human body.
And the theoretical mechanism outlined in that Panacea paper involves bio-nano devices actually operating inside the human body.
Doing what exactly?
Monitoring biochemical signals, like, say, the sudden presence of a viral protein, and then translating those biological events into data that can be broadcast to an external network.
Wow.
Yeah, and the source explicitly links this data transmission to the rollout of 6G cellular networks. They make a point of noting that 6G standards are being finalized for 2028 deployment.
Wait, hold up. I need to push back on the physics of this because it sounds, frankly, impossible on its face.
Fair enough, it sounds wild.
Right. I mean, a 6G network relies on electromagnetic waves. High-frequency cellular signals already struggle to penetrate a thick brick wall in my house.
Oh yeah, the range is terrible.
So how on earth is a microscopic sensor floating inside a human bloodstream supposed to transmit a 6G signal through human tissue, muscle, and skin to reach an external router?
Well, that is the exact technical hurdle that the academic papers in the source are trying to solve.
Okay, so they address this.
They do. The literature cited by the compiler discusses the development of graphene-based plasmonic nanoantennas.
Graphene-based plasmonic nanoantennas?
Yes. Because graphene has unique conductive properties at the nanoscale, these papers theorize it can actually operate in the terahertz band.
And the terahertz band is...
It's the frequency range targeted for 6G. So the idea is that these nanoantennas could essentially bridge the gap between biochemical molecular communication inside your body and electromagnetic wireless networks outside your body.
Here's where it gets really interesting and, frankly, fundamentally terrifying for the audience reading this page. In a traditional medical model, tracking an infectious disease involves population-level statistics, right? Like wastewater testing or just going to a clinic when you feel sick. It's external.
Yes, you go to the doctor.
But the Panacea model shifts the entire boundary of surveillance. If my white blood cells are effectively acting as nodes on a 6G network, constantly broadcasting my internal biological state, I mean, bodily autonomy is no longer just a legal concept. It becomes a cybersecurity issue.
This raises an important question about the dual-use nature of technology, and that is the exact engine driving the fear on this Rumble page.
Dual use meaning it can be used for good or bad.
Right. The academic papers frame this as a utopian public health breakthrough. I mean, imagine detecting the next novel coronavirus the moment it enters patient zero's bloodstream.
You could stop a pandemic before it even starts.
Exactly. But the compiler of the page highlights a very different reality.
Which brings us to the quote from Dr. Joseph Michel Journet that the source features so prominently. The compiler highlights his words in bold. In many cases, we're talking about controlling your genome.
Yeah. And in the context of the actual academic research, controlling your genome likely refers to targeted epigenetic therapies,
Meaning what?
meaning using nanodevices to turn specific gene expressions on or off to fight a disease right at the molecular level. It's just highly advanced, very targeted medicine.
But the Rumble user doesn't see medicine. They see an admission of total biological subjugation.
Exactly.
If a network has the administrative privileges to turn your genes on and off remotely via a 6G terahertz signal, the line between an early disease detection system and a biological remote control evaporates entirely. The medical justification is viewed simply as a Trojan horse.
And that anxiety stems from a perceived loss of containment. If the network reaches into your genome, there's literally no place left to hide.
None.
And when a community believes they're facing a threat of that magnitude, this invisible multi-agency infrastructure designed to hook their internal biology to a cellular network, it fundamentally alters how they process all information and media.
And that perfectly explains the heavy emphasis on censorship in this source material.
Whoa, 100%. Well, think about it. If you believe the U.S. government and global health organizations have spent 25 years building a nano infrastructure to monitor your cells,
Yeah.
you are immediately forced to ask, why isn't the mainstream media reporting on it?
Right. The narrative actually demands an enemy that controls the flow of information.
Yes.
So the source points to the mass censorship of COVID-related news by tech companies during the pandemic as proof of the cover-up.
Exactly.
The algorithmic suppression of alternative viewpoints on platforms like YouTube or Twitter, it isn't viewed as a clumsy attempt to stop medical misinformation. It's viewed as the immune system of the deep state kicking in.
In this framework, big tech and big bio are completely indistinguishable. The censorship is seen as active collusion.
Wow.
And the logic is closed and completely self-reinforcing. Any evidence of the technology proves the conspiracy, and any absence of mainstream coverage proves the censorship protecting the conspiracy.
That's a perfect trap.
It really is. It creates an environment where alternative platforms like Rumble become the only perceived safe havens for truth. Quote, no deep state. They aren't hiding at all. There's only the state and special interests that dictate their actions, and then they will never hold one another accountable. No justice. They will only protect each other.
You know, that completely flips the traditional idea of a conspiracy theory on its head.
It really does.
Because usually a conspiracy implies a shadowy cabal meeting in secret, right? In some smoke-filled room.
Exactly. The Illuminati or whatever.
But the horror is in the mundane visibility of it all.
Right. It's all right there out in the open.
Yeah. They see a bureaucratic machine operating in plain sight with absolute impunity. It's not a secret plot. It's just the cold, unaccountable machinery of the state protecting its own interests.
And then the discourse shifts to demonstrate how this profound distrust acts as like a universal solvent. It just dissolves trust in almost every commercial product.
I saw that.
Yeah. Another user pivots away from 6G and COVID entirely, and they focus instead on the video creators' smoking habits.
I was actually trying to figure out how we jump from terahertz graphene antennas to a pack of cigarettes. It felt like whiplash.
Right. But the user explains that they utilized an AI tool to generate a list of chemical additives found in commercial cigarettes that are not native to raw tobacco. They list things like propylene glycol, formaldehyde, benzene, and hydrogen cyanide.
Which are nasty chemicals.
Oh, very nasty. But the critical part of the comment is their conclusion. They state these chemicals, quote, most likely are part of population control agenda.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, navigating this kind of information ecosystem? Why does a page start with a 25-year government nanotechnology initiative, pivot to COVID-19 vaccines and big tech censorship, and end with the formaldehyde in cigarettes?
It illustrates a heuristic, a mental shortcut that is driven by absolute institutional distrust.
Makes sense.
Once a person accepts the premise that global authorities are perfectly willing to use advanced medical tech to fundamentally alter or monitor human biology against the public's will, well, the concept of a population control agenda just becomes the default lens through which they view the entire world.
Everything becomes weaponized in that worldview.
Everything.
A vaccine mandate is an injection of the network. Algorithmic content moderation is the suppression of the resistance. The chemicals in a consumer product are a slow-acting population call.
Exactly.
The specific details of the science almost cease to matter because the underlying intent of the authorities is just assumed to be universally hostile.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, The source material we've unpacked today sits at the exact collision point of two deeply conflicting realities.
Right.
On one side, we have the documented trajectory of incredible, accelerating scientific achievement. We are genuinely developing the capacity to interface with human biology at the molecular level.
Which is amazing.
It is. Concepts like the Internet of Bio-Nano Things represent an attempt to digitize our immune systems, to create a world where a virus is neutralized by a targeted epigenetic command before you even develop a cough.
But on the other side, you have a grassroots movement that looks at the exact same scientific papers, the exact same government funding initiatives, and they see an existential threat to human freedom.
Yes.
They see an unholy alliance of government bureaucracy, telecom infrastructure, and big tech censorship, all marshaled together to strip away bodily autonomy.
And the tragedy of the discourse is the total breakdown of shared reality. Both the scientists writing that panacea paper and the user compiling this Rumble page, they're looking at the exact same data points regarding 6G bandwidth and biological sensors.
But they come to totally different conclusions.
Yeah, one envisions the eradication of disease, while the other envisions a digital prison built inside their own cells.
We've covered a staggering amount of territory today, tracing a narrative thread from the bureaucratic origins of the National Nanotechnology Initiative through the mRNA mechanisms of the COVID-19 vaccines, into the theoretical physics of terahertz biological networks, and finally into the psychological fallout of perceived mass censorship.
It's been a heavy one.
It really has. But as we wrap up this deep dive, there is one final lingering concept that the source material flirts with, but doesn't quite fully articulate. And I want to leave you to ponder it as you step back into the real world.
Oh, I like where this is going.
If the visions outlined in these academic papers ultimately come to pass, if our internal cellular signaling is successfully mapped, monitored, and mitigated by an external 6G network managed by a central health authority to prevent the next pandemic, at what precise point does our biological self end and the digital network begin?
That is the question, isn't it?
Right. If your immune response is literally just a software update, are you still entirely human, or have you become a peripheral device?
It is the ultimate ship of Theseus problem applied to the human body, and the answer will likely define the next century of technological development.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. As always, stay curious, keep investigating the architecture of the information you consume, and keep questioning the world around you. We'll see you next time.